But therein lies the secret to getting really good bonsai, and that is to look beyond what you're seeing and seeing whether you can get a bonsai out of a material like this. It has a lot of branches. It's had a little bit of work done already. There's movement in the trunk. This is just in a growing stage, and you can't make one of these out of something like this, as the article said, in 2 to 3 hours to look as old as that. So part of the class, this lesson tonight, is to go through some of the techniques that can enhance this to look like something like that. But in between is 20 years. So that's still the part of the journey that we're having to take. Now, very simply, this, I won't do it because it's not my tree, of course, but very simply, you could make this into a nice little bonsai simply by taking off the top part of this tree, using that as a new apex. It gives you great taper, but look at these lovely long branches. It's got branchlets already on it. Now this is an South African fig. It's a Ficus natalensis. Really tough, grows really well. Is one that's a little bit older. Now to save obviously time, I've wired these two up today just to save the time of having to wire the trees. I've left the branches in exactly the same position as they were, without altering them. But again, maybe a little bit too tall, a bit too spindly, but there are methods and techniques that we have where we can change that. Most of you, of course, know what they are. Simply wiring and reshaping and bring them all into perspective. When you look at a tree in a pot in a nursery, it may have been there for quite some time. And you may find that when you look at a pot like this, you naturally choose either that side and you look at that side to see if it looks any good as a bonsai. Do all of you look at the tree all around? Most don't. They look from the side which looks the most obvious side because it's in a pot. Now when they put the tree in the pot, it may have been the right side. But trees change as they're just sitting there and doing nothing. They'll change. They grow towards the light. If this has been against a wall or a fence, this side branches will be weaker here. But on this side, they'll be really quite growing towards the light. So always make sure you turn the trees around all the time. So, how to reduce the height of the tree without actually pruning it. The obvious thing is to prune it. That one's simple. To prune it, it brings it all back into perspective. This can be achieved quite easily, as I'm just going through some of the things which you all know anyway, and that is to bend it. And this wood is very... Maybe I better sell this one first before...
Heck yeah, might get cheaper.
It's not half it off. It's not half the price. But it actually is to put bends where you can. And by the way, because of all the rain we have, these trees are very wet, so I'm not going to try and push it out of its what it should happen. If you want to bend trees, make sure the trees are really dry. The drier the trees are, all it means is you may read about it in books, is keep the trees dry. When you take the water away, which means let the trees dry, when you take it out of the tree, the cell structure inside the tree shrink. So therefore, the branches are more flexible because they're smaller. When they're full of not so much water, but the food from the water that the trees are getting and the nutrients in the tree, they swell up like big bubbles. And when the branches are full of water, you try and bend them, they'll snap. And there's some water bubbles, not water bubbles, but imagine like water bubbles bursting because you get compression. The inside of the curve you're bending, they'll become compressed and the outside will stretch. That's where they'll die first, from that position. So always keep your trees nice and dry before you do any severe bending. And push the tree way out of beyond its thing where you want to get it back to, and hold it there for a few seconds. That way the cell structures are changing. I can feel them. I feel a lovely number of but the cell structures are changing, and by doing that and holding it and leaving it, and use all your fingers, use all the strength you've got in your wrist, and hold it there just for a short time.
Sort of like being a personal trainer for trees.
And you can see that you can start to get more motion in the tree. Again, hold it the same, then bend it back the other way. Then again, hold it for a short space of time. So that's at least has put much more of a curve in there than just leaving it straight. If you do this twice a week for 3 weeks, you will have tremendous movement in this trunk. If you haven't got the grip with your fingers to do it, just use your, I'll get a couple of pair of pliers, and you can then bend it with your pliers as well on the wire. But make sure you hold the wire, not the bark of the tree. You don't want to ring bark the tree. That will help you to get the bends and curves into the tree itself. Then we'll bend him back again. I purposely use different coloured wires so it stands out more for you to see. It's better to keep to the one colour of wire if you can, but it really doesn't make much difference as long as it works. If you can use copper wire, that's very good, because copper is much harder, it holds longer. But if you can't, aluminium wire. We've had a bit of a debate over the weekend about wire, where it should be when you actually put two wires together. I like the wires to be close together, because that way you've got optimal width of the two wires together in the one spot for bending purposes. There's some suggestion down where people are using more spiral that you'll notice, which I point out in some of the trees this weekend, where there's more wires in between and not so close together. It's personal choice. I found this works better for me, but if it works the other way for you, that's fine as well. My feeling is, because we have the wires are at a 45-degree angle, and if you're putting wires in between it, I think what's really happening, it starts to get the effect of a spring. So when you come to bend the branches, you won't get the same effect as I've got just now, because you work a spring which is equal coils all the way up will spring back again, because you're fighting yourself with that curve. So if you leave a 45-degree angle, it should work for you quite clearly.